That's a great introduction. Thank you very much. And I hope you can all see my screen. You should be seeing uh, a little clip from the Matrix, the numbers and letters falling down the screen. That was an iconic image from the Matrix, wasn't it? So we're going to be using Mentimeter. Get your phones out. Get yourself onto menti.com and enter the code 6294367. That's 6294367, and you'll find those at the top of each of the slides. So as you go along with me, you'll be able to answer questions, like stuff. We're going to have polls. We're going to have some interactive sessions. You're going to be able to put your opinion in there as well. So when I was first approached by Martin to come and do this presentation, we had only just heard of coronavirus. It hadn't really hit the UK. It was a vague worry at the back of our minds. But over the months that followed, the world has changed in ways we could never possibly imagine. And in the film The Matrix, those of you who've watched it, Neo, he's given the choice of a red pill and a blue pill. And the red pill would mean that Neo leaves the virtual world that he's been living in to face the bitter knowledge of what the real world looks like, the physical world. And the blue pill returns one to a virtual world. And while the planet is facing the red pill reality of prolonged COVID-19, to succeed, we're also going to need to focus on throwing ourselves into what I'm calling the post-tactile world, the world in which we're not touching, we're engaging virtually. So, first poll, check that you're all awake, check that you've not gone off to get yourself a cup of coffee, get your phones out. Remember, your code is 6294367. Which of the pills would you have chosen? Wow, everyone's choosing the red at the moment. Who's choosing the blue? Anybody changing that to blue? Oh, we're getting more of a split now. We've got 5 votes, 7 votes. Keep voting for me. So you can go to menti.com on your computer. You can use Menti on your phone. Whatever's the easiest way for you to access it. 16 votes, 17. Ooh, edging towards 50-50 here. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. So let's go back to where it all began for me. Martin and I met up at a conference that I was speaking at for APM back in March, 3 weeks before lockdown. And I was asked to speak on the future of work and skills. And I talked in that presentation about how the next generation were going to demand a level of flexibility and a better work-life balance that actually was going to completely change the way that we work as project professionals, in fact, as all professionals who work in white-collar industries, that we would be needing to create tools and processes that would mean we could be just as effective as a virtual team as we are when we are physically in the office. And of course, when we do that as an organization, we also have benefits because we're able to fish in a wider pool of talent. We're not limited to the skills and people available in a particular geographical area, because when we have truly virtual work, we can work from anywhere. Little did I know that a few weeks later, I would be part of the organization rolling out Microsoft Teams to 1.25 million NHS workers so that they could do exactly this. And quite the experience it's been. So this is where I ended up working. This is my flat in Shrewsbury. I'm really lucky. I've been running a virtual team. I've worked away from the office for 5 years or more, and I've been running a virtual consultancy for a couple of those years. But I wasn't home all the time. In those situations, I was out traveling. Home was my base. Home was my sanctuary that I came back to at the end of a long week of traveling, engaging with lots of people. I could get my expenses done, write the reports I needed to, plan my next week of teaching or whatever it was I was doing. And I had to take the blue pill and turn my life to living online. So this is where I was. This is where I was for lockdown. Now, I suppose I better introduce myself. This is me on a good day. I work for an arm's length body of the NHS. I'm not going to say which. I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out. But I'm here actually because I also own a consulting company which works for government agencies, multinational clients, or it did. We had several clients, lots of great work coming down the pipeline, and within 3 weeks of lockdown, we had lost every single contract. But my work in the arm's length body of the NHS, I'm currently, my new job as of 6 weeks ago, is running the access point through which all requests for network connectivity and communication tools across health and social care come in. And I'm also an APM committee member. I'm on the benefits and value specific interest group. Through that, I ended up being the subject matter expert for the e-learning program on benefits management available through APM Learning. And I'm a contributor to various textbooks such as the Managing Benefits textbook and so on and so forth. So that's me on a good day. Now, I was really interested to hear the previous speakers mention diversity and diversity in the workforce, because this is me on a bad day. This is me when my fibromyalgia, which is a neurological condition that affects the whole of my body, it gives me pain and fatigue at varying levels day to day. This was a day where I couldn't stand up, and the headset is there not just because I was doing conference calls, but because I was having to voice control my laptop because my hands hurt too much to type. So this is a workforce that we can tap into. We can involve people who don't have or can't access a standard 9 to 5 turning up in the office lifestyle. People who have disabilities, people who have caring responsibilities, people for whom work is something that takes a lot more effort than perhaps those of us who are non-disabled, those of us who have no caring responsibilities, find perhaps much easier. So this is me on a bad day. So my work in the NHS, what was I doing during lockdown? Now, the first couple of weeks, I was actually on the bench, as we call it in consulting terms, because pretty much everything stopped except for the COVID-19 projects. I was put to work leading a team of volunteers from all parts of our organisation, everyone from programme heads to receptionists, keeping one of the key online services running. We saved lives. We directly saved lives because we made it possible for the health professionals, the people manning 111, 999, and so on, to get to the people who really needed their help. And my team varied, never less than maybe 20, at one point over 100. There was a 3-week period where I had 55 direct reports. And I wasn't doing all the normal stuff that a project manager would do. I was people managing. This was crisis management. I was checking that people were all right, that they had the equipment they needed, that they had the environment they needed, what help could we give them, what support did they need. I'll also get to my personal company later and tell you what was going on there. So one of the things that made a big difference for me I really struggled those first few weeks on the bench because I hadn't got a purpose. And until I had a purpose, I didn't have resilience. Having a purpose is how I was able to survive lockdown, how I was able to keep going at the pace that I needed to. And I reminded my staff regularly how what we did mattered. Now, I want you to give me a thumbs up. You've got two buttons on this one. You've got a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Give me a thumbs up if during lockdown you felt you had a purpose. We've got two thumbs up at the moment. Are you awake? Yes, 3 people. Excellent. During lockdown, did you have a purpose? Give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. 5 thumbs up. I'm really pleased to see that. I'm so very glad that no one so far has said they didn't have a purpose to drive them during lockdown. For those people who are on furlough, it must have been incredibly difficult to maintain your mental resilience. Oh, we've got a few saying that they weren't able to. Excellent. We've got more and more coming in here. 21, 22 saying, yes, I had shared purpose. I knew what I was doing. I knew that I was making a difference. But we have, unfortunately, got a few people who've been saying, no, unfortunately, during lockdown, I didn't have a purpose. And that will have affected your resilience. So I reminded myself on a regular basis about our purpose and about how what we did saved lives. And that made a big difference to them. So I'm going to move our screen on and I'm going to ask you, how well during lockdown did your boss link what you were doing to making a difference? How good was your boss at helping you understand that what you were working on was actually going to help people, was going to make a difference during lockdown? So we've got a bit of a peek towards the extremely well linked. We've got a bit of a peak in the middle. Unfortunately, we've got a few people at the end there. 4 votes so far. So keep voting for me on your Menti screen, whether that's on your computer or on your smartphone. Right, all good. We've got some more votes coming in. 10. Any more for any more? How are we doing here? Yeah, so it's looking like roughly 50-50 of us, maybe slightly more than 50%, had some link to what they were doing to a purpose that was going to help them understand why they were doing what they were doing, how that was helping. Excellent. Thank you very much. So here's my first tip for you. Define a shared purpose for a sustainable and resilient team. How are you going to do that? That's one of the things I want you to think about when you come away from this presentation. How are you going to define a shared purpose for your team? So actually they're resilient together and they're supporting each other. How are we doing there? Okay. So the second thing I needed to think about when I started off with this team of disparate people, all of whom were going through the shock of going into lockdown. They were suddenly working from home when most of them had never done so. They were doing a job they'd never done before. I had to say to them, I will make mistakes. And that is one of the signs of a leader who is, I hope, comfortable with herself, but certainly one who is honest, is that you admit that you are going to make mistakes. You're not perfect. You're working in a crisis environment in this situation. So this is what I said to my team in our first team meeting. I said, I will fail. I'll fail with good intent, and I ask you to trust in my good intent. Have patience with me and tell me what I get wrong and how I can fix it. Now you'll see on the screen you've got thumbs up, thumbs down. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard a manager say that to you. Give me a thumbs up if they've ever told you, I'm going to fail, I'm going to make mistakes, please be patient with me, please trust that I'm doing my best, tell me when I've made mistakes. and I will try to correct it, and tell me how I can fix it. So we've got 1 vote so far for yes, I've heard that. If you haven't heard that from a manager, give me a thumbs down. Let me know there that you've not heard that from. Okay, so we've got a few people saying no, I've not heard that, but plenty more saying yes, I've had a manager say I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to fail. Brilliant. We're getting what we've got 10, 11 votes. Oh, we're 50-50 at the moment. This was a big admission. This was a team that had never met me before. I had never met them. This was one of our first meetings. I had, I think, about 40 people on this call, and one of the first things I had to say to them, I'm going to fail. But is that actually an admission of weakness? No, it's not. It's an admission of strength. Brilliant. So I want to know from you, what leadership and followership mistakes have you made during lockdown? Now, I'm sure there are loads of mistakes we have all made. And followership, of course, is as important as leadership. What mistakes have you made? If you weren't in a leadership position, tell me what mistakes you made about your followership of your manager, your followership of the person who's leading you at the moment. Those of you in leader positions, what did you do where you messed up, where you got it wrong? I hope this means that this silence means you're all frantically typing on your phones. Not talking to people enough, yes. Yeah, that was a big problem for, I think, all of us. One of the issues when we're under stress and we've got time pressures is we stop communicating. We close down our circle of who we talk to because we feel we haven't got time to explain ourselves. We haven't got time to explain what we need from people. Not sharing my struggles. Yeah, that was one of my big mistakes. I absolutely was not honest enough. I didn't have somebody who I could go to and say, I'm really struggling with this. Not contacting the wider team. Yeah, we've got to maintain our relationships. We've got to keep our channels open with the wider team, those who can help us with that wider shared purpose beyond our immediate job. Undervaluing the bouncing off each other aspect of the office. Yeah, we'll talk later about how we can deal with that kind of an issue. Not looking after my own mental well-being. I'm seeing such a trend here in what you're saying to me, and it's one I've felt myself. And I'll be honest, I have struggled, and I am still struggling. Micromanaging, yeah, checking on your team too much. Yeah, I had to resist the urge because I couldn't see them for going off and checking on them every 20 minutes. Emails rather than conversations. Now that's interesting. Again, we've got a communications theme here. It's easier because you're not having to engage with the person, you're not having to have a discussion. You're just firing out an email. Now, sometimes that's about when you can work. Not all of my staff worked an average 9 to 5 day. Some of them had caring responsibilities that meant what they could do was a couple of hours very first thing in the morning and then spend the evening working for me. But emails, it's a dangerous trap, isn't it? Failed communication, over resilience on technology, clarity of communication on tasks, being too optimistic and too pessimistic. Yeah, we can swing from one extreme to the other, can't we? Relying on past processes and systems. This is great. Missing quiet people. Now that's a really important point. Thank you, whoever raised that one. I'm going to move us on from here. Loads of interesting stuff, but I think it's time for us to move to our next screen. So, oh, have I moved on too far? Here was my big, there we go, that's wrong, right screen. Here was my big mistake, or one of my big mistakes. Agile Principle 8 says that agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and by that they mean the project staff, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Now, give me a thumbs up if during lockdown you were sticking to this principle, and give me a thumbs down if you were heading for a burnout. Thumbs up if you were able to follow that agile principle of a sustainable, constant pace. Thumbs down if you were burning the candle at both ends and burning the team out. Their opening line in this about promoting sustainable development, that's key, isn't it? It's not just sustainable development of the technology, it's also sustainable development of the team. Now, in a crisis, we are not always able to do this. I was working some silly hours. Some of my team were as well, particularly as I also had a consulting company, as I said, and I had to deal with the loss of my clients. I had to deal with how my staff were feeling, how they were adapting to lockdown. All of them had a day job as well as working for me. How my business partners were reacting because they were both between jobs when the coronavirus hit. All of that was unsustainable. When you're in a crisis situation, it's about how quickly can I bring us back to this constant pace? And how quickly can I ensure that we are taking the breaks that we need? Because actually, it's not about going from a mad pace back to a normal pace. In between, there's got to be a break. There's got to be a period of recovery. And I'll hold my hands up. That was my big lesson. I didn't do that. I came out of the team I'd been working in during the first lockdown in June. I spent the summer working flat out on some very large business cases. And then in end of August, I was given a new job to prepare for a second wave. I didn't give myself a downtime. I didn't give myself that opportunity to refresh so that now I can work at a constant pace. And I'm paying for it. I'll be honest, I'm paying for it right now. So thank you everyone who's voted on that. It's really hard to see how many of you actually have had the same experience with me. 17 people saying, actually, during lockdown, I wasn't able to maintain a constant pace. The 10 of you who did, well done you. I'm really glad to see that. So here's my next tip. When you are dealing with your staff, you need to be honest and human, and they'll support you. And they did, and they still do. I'll tell you, my project officer, my assistant at the moment, she's brilliant. She knows even when nobody else does. She'll be able to tell within a couple of minutes on a call when I'm struggling, when I'm having a bad day pain-wise, or when my fatigue is really getting to me. She'll spot the signs and she'll step in. She'll effectively cover for me. You know, she'll make sure that I'm being reminded of stuff. So she'll drop me a little note. Don't forget you were planning to ask so-and-so about such and such. Or she'll find a document for me that I'm fumbling to find. So my mistakes, though, I rolled out processes too quickly and I had to go back and change them. I didn't spot staff who were struggling until they were really struggling. But what I did, I told my staff what I was doing and why I was doing it. And they told me when that didn't work. So they came to me when they needed help, and they came to me to tell me when what I'd put in place wasn't ideal and how to improve it. So that's my tip. Now, we've all of us had to get used to Zoom presentations and Teams meetings, and I'm talking at the moment to a little white light next to a pinhole camera on my laptop. I'm not talking to people, or it doesn't feel like I'm broadcasting into silence. We have to have a virtual presence. As leaders, we've got to be conscious of the words that we use, the way we look, how we follow up on things, how we behave, how we encourage people. And I sat down with my circle of people who I'm going to talk about later, and I said, what do I need to project? What are the traits I need to project? And I felt I needed to show that I was trustworthy. I needed to show I was grateful to my staff for what they were doing, and I needed to project supportiveness. So those were my 3 traits that I was looking for: trustworthy, grateful, and supportive. I want you to tell me, what are the 3 words that would describe the presence you're looking to project as a leader? What 3 words? They don't have to be the same ones as me. They can be completely different. You're all working in different contexts. But what do you as a leader need to intentionally project? Oh, I think there's some deep thought going on here. Trusting, credible, and engaging. Oh, those are great words, aren't they? Trusting rather than trustworthy. That's interesting, because that's about saying, I can't see you, but I trust you. Confidence. Yeah, I was definitely trying to project confidence. Sometimes I needed to show them when I wasn't confident, because that was when I started looking like I wasn't open to feedback. But I definitely had to, at the important times, project confidence. Trust is really coming out strongly in this. Authenticity. Oh, that's a great word, isn't it? And it's such an important one. It's really easy, isn't it, to spot an inauthentic leader, someone who is manipulating rather than curating, should we say. Vision, yes, having a vision, absolutely. And without the vision, you can't communicate your shared purpose, and therefore your team won't be sustainable because they won't be resilient. Oh, we're getting lots more words. Open, transparency, honest, listening, open to options, definitely. Competent, yeah. Trustworthy, leadership. Humour, that's a great one. Whoever put that up, well done you. Yeah, humour is such an important thing. I set up a Teams channel on for our group where people could post stuff that made them laugh. We posted pictures of our pets. We posted memes that we found funny, and we even created some. We posted, I think my favourite, you've got to Google this one, Misery Bear does lockdown. That was hilarious. So you'll all have to switch from Menti to Google now. Put in Misery Bear does lockdown. That was very, very funny. But humour is a really important part of this. That's a fantastic set of words. Thank you very much. We're going to move on from that one now. So I said, didn't I, that I was talking with a group of people, planning how I was going to be intentional with my presence, what I was looking to project. I needed to keep it pretty simple. 3 words is enough. More than that, and you start finding things that conflict, or you can't juggle them all. Get it down to 3 words. So here was the team, or one of the teams. Welcome to the Benefits and Value Specific Interest Group, or some of us. This was our Friday night regular wind down. You can see we're all taking social distancing very seriously here. What I was doing is I was creating a personal board of directors. That's a support network. These are mentors, supporters, people who have a credible and legitimate opinion on you. It's not friends. I mean, some of them are. Some of those people are friends. But then it's not there. They're not there because of friendship. They're there because they legitimately can advise me and be a sounding board. I want you to give me a thumbs up if you have a personal board of directors. Thumbs down if you haven't got one yet. I hope after this presentation you'll be going out and creating one. Now, I'll tell you honestly, I am struggling right now. I've got a new job. It's in a new area. All the work streams in it are technical. I'm not a technical person. All of the work streams are ones I've never worked in before. I don't know any of the people I'm working with from previous roles. So I have had a massive learning curve, and I'm shattered right now. You know, Martin mentioned at the beginning the Nightingales. Yet they gave me a bit of a late night last night, getting all of that set up, particularly as I knew I needed to give time to this presentation this morning. So my personal board of directors, my mentors are on there, other people who are supporting me, and they're telling me when I'm looking too tired, when I'm not making sense. They're advising me how I can better manage my resilience. They're advising me on how I can tackle stuff like, I've never done commercial work before. How do I deal with that? Who do I speak to? What do I ask for? They are helping me with understanding myself and my strengths and reminding me of when I succeed. Because that little inner voice that we've all got, some of us have got louder ones than others, sat there at the back of my mind going, you're not good at this. You're taking a long time to pick stuff up. You're not making any sense. You're not showing leadership. And they're reminding me, yes, you are. Look how you wrote that board report. You wrote that press release. You dealt with that situation. Look how that particular presentation was well received. They give me the support and the reflective time to evaluate how I'm leading, and they give me advice. They're people who I can take the mask off with, albeit we're all wearing masks on that one. And they are also people whose strengths match my non-strengths. I'm not going to call them weaknesses. So together, we actually make a very effective team. So I can see we've got 9 people saying you've got a personal board of director. Fantastic. The 13 who haven't, I hope after this you're going to be going out there and thinking, who could I have on my personal board of directors? Who do I trust? Who can help me with what I'm going through at the moment? So there's my next tip. Create and curate, because people come and go from my personal board of directors. So all of this actually leads me to talk about the emotional budget. You might have heard of emotional budgets. This is about having compassion, but if you don't understand the emotional budget, then you're going to misdirect your compassion. So sustainability in a team, sorry, gone on too many. Sustainability in a team and in a career means monitoring your emotional budget. What's an emotional budget? We've got a baseline level of stress that's ongoing. Maybe it's financial. We've got kids who are maybe doing exams, or who are struggling with potty training or whatever it is. We've got parents. We've got stuff that's going on in our towns, in our workplace, in our clubs and societies that we're members of. All of these are baseline levels of stress. That's like paying your regular bills. You pay your rent, you buy food, and then your budget has shocks. The car needs some work doing. That's going to take a chunk out of your financial budget this month. And when we go overdrawn emotionally, that leads to depression, anxiety, lack of resilience. It erodes our resilience, and all the stresses become unmanageable. And I am overdrawn at the moment. I recognise that. And I was overdrawn at points during lockdown as well. And my personal board of directors helped me know when I was, and helped me find ways of getting back into balance. But we've all taken on a new bill. We've all got a new direct debit going out, because whether or not we are directly affected by COVID-19, the baseline level of stress that's going on, what we hear on the news, what our friends tell us, what somebody sends us on Facebook, all of that is taking up space in your budget. That means that now all your regular bills, take you that much closer to the red. So there's less space in your budget for dealing with the shocks. And as a leader, it's important to recognize what's in your staff, what's in your followers' emotional budgets. Understand how you can be a compassionate leader by shaping work to support their emotional budget, to take away the stresses that you can, or at least not make them worse. Okay, so that's the emotional budget. Now, my emotional budget, of course, was not just taken up with my NHS work. I had the virtual consulting company. We were going well before lockdown. You know, we were going through a phase where we were trying to evolve what we did. We were still pretty much a startup. We'd only been going 18 months or so. And I had to deal with trying to reshape the company into something that could survive in the economic climate that was hitting us. And that involves some very late nights, some very hard work. Eventually, as a partnership, we had to sit down and say, this isn't working at the moment. Our emotional budgets are full. And this is one thing too many. It's taking us overdrawn. It's taking our staff overdrawn. And so I still have Transformist, but I don't really have the headspace to do anything with it. And I'm sure when things calm down, I will start things up again. But I had to say no. And I bet a lot of you find it difficult to say no, particularly when our pride's involved. Transformist is my creation. So, of course, my pride is involved in this. So, tell me, what's in your emotional budget? On Mentimeter, you've got 100 points or £100. Tell me what you're spending your emotional budget on. It's going to take you a minute or two. You can either type the numbers in or you can move the sliders. Has anyone finished all of them yet? How are we doing? Are you spreading your 100 points or your £100 across your emotional budget there? Good. Here we go. Some results. Finances. Yeah, that really doesn't surprise me that finance is a big issue for a lot of people at the moment. And our health, particularly focusing on COVID-19, family well-being, it's put a lot of pressure on a lot of people. I'm not sure which is worse, being separated from people we love or being locked in the same house as them, having to work in the same rooms as them. But for all of us, that has been a part of our emotional budget. Our non-COVID health, yeah, I've had to worry about that. Global events, of course, are taking up a part of our emotional budget. Housing. I'm so sorry to hear that somebody is worrying about housing at the moment. But that's a fundamental part of our security and our resilience. And if these issues are not dealt with and are not stable, that emotional budget is all taken up on our legitimately on what's going on in our lives. And then work stresses on top of that are just going to add to the pressure until we end up overdrawn. So I hope those of you who are saying housing, for instance, those of you who are saying finances and relationships, I hope you're able to tell your boss what's in your emotional budget at the moment, what you're dealing with, and that they will have the compassion to work with you to find a way for you to do your job so that you still feel that you have a purpose, you still have that sense of well-being and resilience from that, but it's not taking you overdrawn. Great. Well, we've got some really interesting votes on there. I'm going to move us on. So this is tip 5. You need to prioritise, forecast, track and report your emotional budget, not just your project budget. So that's tip 5. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of us is finding making us tired is having to be on screen at all the time. Give me a thumbs up if everyone on your team has their camera on in meetings. Thumbs down if all you see is a blank screen with lots of initials on it. Thumbs up if people are putting their cameras on. Yeah, if you can't see faces, you can't get a sense of how people are. A lot of the research shows that if we aren't able to see people or we're working remotely, trust declines and we start to assume the worst of people. It's one of the reasons why I said to my staff at the beginning and repeated it regularly, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm making them in good faith. Tell me when I've made them and tell me how to fix them. So if you don't have your camera on, you're diminishing trust and engagement with you. You might be zoomed out, but as leaders, we have got to be visible. Got some votes coming in here. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. 9 people saying, yes, we've all got our cameras on. 14, 15 saying, nope, blank screens. One of the things we did at Transformis, we had open offices. So every now and then, one of us would start a Zoom meeting or I think it was GoTo meeting. Not for us to discuss anything particular. There was no agenda. It was just for us to pop on, have a chat, have a cup of coffee, work just with the noise of somebody else working in the background. So it started to feel a little more connected. My business partner, Emmy, though, we did have to mute her on a regular basis because she hums when she's gone. It was driving us crazy. But open offices or virtual offices are a great way of helping people to feel a part of things and to start to have those casual conversations again that we're all missing. So, how many hours a day do you spend on video calls? And of those, how many of them do you spend with your camera on? Probably not right now, maybe during lockdown. Tell me during lockdown, how many hours a day did you spend in online meetings and calls? So we've got people saying, yeah, 6.5 meetings. Wow, and that's the average, 6.5 hours. Mine was somewhere around 8 hours a day, probably higher in some cases. And I had to spend the whole of that with my camera on. And that is exhausting. You've got to recognise that. You've got to factor it into your emotional budget. But there's a significant difference, isn't there, between how much time we're spending on these online calls and how much of that we're actually putting our camera on for. I'd like you to have a think about how that affects your team and how you can gently, with humour, start to encourage more of a cameras on culture. Okay, I'm going to take us on from there. So enabling social interaction and putting your camera on. That's my next tip. That's tip 6. Now, open leadership is about having transparency of decision making and crowdsourcing your decision making. Give me a thumbs up if you were involved in a lessons learned from the COVID-19 period, even on a non-COVID project. Thumbs up if your organisation or your team, you held a lessons learned where everyone was able to say what had worked well, what had not worked well, how can we make that better next time. Thumbs down if you didn't do a lessons learned at the end of COVID-19. This was our lessons learned board from running a conference. And it's Miro, but you can use whatever whiteboard suits you. We all put post-it notes on of all the things that we thought worked really well, all the things that didn't work well, and then we started grouping them into themes. So the lessons around sales and marketing, the lessons around social media, what worked, how our teamwork was going, the technology that worked and the stuff that didn't, the stuff that went wrong, and there's always something that goes wrong. I'm sure Martin is doing a very serene impression on the surface and is frantically scrabbling around in the background, making sure that everybody's in the right place at the right time with the right cameras on and off. So doing this in a way that where everyone can see it and everyone can see the results of it and everyone can see the plan that comes from it is important. And it's even more important when we are leading in a virtual world, when we have taken our blue pill, because without that, we are even further diminishing that trust that we're losing by not having that physical interpersonal relationship and interpersonal reactions and engagement. So this is a really important technique. You can use whatever works for you, but I have all of the reports I write in a shared Teams area. Anyone can read them at any time. All the stuff I'm working on is crowdsourced as far as possible. So tell me, how much do you know? What's your knowledge and understanding about the decisions made at these different levels of your organisation? Everything from your immediate team all the way up to the entire organisation. How much do you actually know and understand about those decisions? How open are your leaders? That doesn't surprise me. So the further up you go on the scale of the size, the less you're feeling like you have a knowledge and understanding. That's our first vote. Anyone else? I'm really glad to see somebody saying that they fully understand what's going on at their team level. Here we go, more votes coming in. Yeah, so immediate team, 3.5 out of 5. Wider team, around 3. Project or program level, the decisions that you have a knowledge and understanding of are hovering around 3. Portfolio, it gets a bit less. Organisation level, very low actual understanding and knowledge of the decisions being made. In Transformis, we had a policy of having open decision making. So all the team were involved in it. And if the team said to us, we don't want to work with this client, for instance, we didn't work with the client. If the team said to us, we don't want to use Miro, we want to use Microsoft Whiteboard, not sure why they would, we went with that because our decision making was open and they understood why we made decisions. Now, when you have that level of understanding, you create a team of leaders because everybody takes responsibility. Everybody feels that they've contributed. And that is a sustainable team. And you don't just apply this in your team, you can apply it in your profession. You can apply it in your sports club. You can apply it at home. This is a lesson for all of life. Now, one of the teams that I worked with during lockdown, they were made up of young, university-educated, technically savvy, non-disabled people. They were ethnically diverse, but they were all, should we say, competent, capable. They didn't have many barriers to accessing technology and online services, for example. And I was asked, how do we build empathy in this team for people who don't have their advantages? Because you can't build a sustainable team and a sustainable talent pipeline or a project management profession if we can't bring our whole selves to work. And that became even more poignant with the death of George Floyd and the other events in the States after that. Tell me, thumbs up, if your team discussed those events. If your team sat down and had a conversation about the death of George Floyd, about Black Lives Matter, about the protests. And if you didn't, let me know by giving me a thumbs down. Has your team been open about this? Have you discussed how it affects people in your team? How people who you might not even have been able to see from their picture on a camera would be affected, have been affected. Now, I am in an interracial relationship. So whilst I am white, Black Lives Matter had particular poignancy for me. And it was contributing to my emotional budget. And my team members, because it's a pretty new relationship and I hadn't really talked about it, were not aware that I was affected by this in a way that perhaps others were not. And how I was affected was nowhere near how my boyfriend was affected. So 5 of you, your teams have been brave, have had this conversation. I congratulate you. Those of you who haven't, I challenge you now, go back, have a conversation about this, talk about the events that have affected us. I set up something called Uncomfortable Conversations, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. It's an important part of transparency, and it's both harder and easier to do on camera, to do virtually. An uncomfortable conversation are the questions that you wouldn't normally ask somebody, that we're now too polite to come out with. I did the first one. We were expecting an audience of about 15. We had 87 turn up. He was black, working class, from a northern city, had dyslexia, now works in the Houses of Parliament. And we talked about everything from how his dyslexia affected the way that he processes information and how that made him appear to be an awkward sod to his team, down to how his family and how he had been affected by prejudice. The second uncomfortable conversation, an American lesbian from a non-practicing Muslim family whose sexuality and lack of marriage rights forced her to choose between her dream job in her home country and the love of her life in the UK. So thumbs up if you have had an uncomfortable conversation, in public or in private, about the events that are going on. Are you doing something in your organisation to tackle these and to speak about these questions, to enable people to talk about the things that we're not currently talking about? One of the things that people, my colleague told me, is people often stumble over the word lesbian. Are you having these conversations so that lesbian is not a word that people stumble over, and therefore people who have a sexuality that could be labelled that way don't feel like they're the odd one out, that they're the uncomfortable one? Thank you. So the uncomfortable conversations are the important conversations, and that's my final tip. So where are we now? Here's me in Shrewsbury. I want you to tell me, are you going to choose the blue pill or the red pill? And I think we'll move to questions. I will leave this screen open for you to put in what you're going to do differently. Which pill are you going to take now that you've listened to my presentation?